Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. This is your Akazaki Yahoo, and I start this broadcast as I would start any broadcast by first of all giving all praise, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom wa baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
I am joined this afternoon by my most esteemed Akinanaya. Shabbat shalom, Aki.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Maki. Shabbat Shalom, Yasharal. Call Halal Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Mashiach.
Hallelujah. Yes, indeed. All praises to the Father in the name of the Son, the Messiah. Yes, indeed. All praises. Yeah. So we are back for another review here, and we found a pretty interesting video to get into, and we're not going to delay it. We're going to get straight to it. Hope you are edified in the showing of this video. Let's get to it here.
The history of slavery is a painful reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty and oppression. Slavery in America was deeply entrenched from the colonial era through the antebellum period, with enslaved Africans and their descendants subjected to forced labor, physical punishment, and various forms of degradation. The term antebellum derives from Latin, where ante means before and bellum means war. In the context of American history, the antebellum era refers to the period before the American Civil War, specifically the years between the late 18th century, which was after the War of 1812, all the way down to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. The term antebellum era is commonly used to describe this period because it captures the distinct social, economic, and political characteristics of the time, which ultimately led to the conflict and division that resulted in the Civil War.
I don't know if I mentioned that this is the untold abuse of black male slaves by white women. That's what we're getting into here. So he's giving us a pretext, and I'm not going to interrupt much because this video is a little bit longer than what we normally break down, but definitely worth, some time. So.
It was a time of significant growth and transformation in the United States, marked by industrialization, westward expansion, and debates over slavery. Yes, slavery. The antebellum South was characterized by the use of slavery and the culture it fostered. During the procession of this era, Southern intellectuals and leaders gradually shifted from portraying slavery as an embarrassing and temporary system to a defense of slavery as a positive good. And for this, the abolitionist movement, which had just come into existence then, was harshly criticized by these leaders for being in opposition to slavery. The demand for slave labor and the U.S. ban on importing more slaves from Africa drove up prices for slaves, making it profitable for smaller farms in older settled areas, such as Virginia, to sell their slaves further south and west. Most farmers in the South had small to medium-sized farms with few slaves, but the large plantation owners' wealth, often reflected in the number of slaves they owned, afforded them considerable prestige and political power. During the antebellum era, the nation grappled with issues such as states' rights, the expansion of slavery into new territories, and tensions between the North and the South. These factors contributed to the eventual outbreak of the Civil War, which had a profound and lasting impact on the country. However, while the dehumanization and mistreatment of slaves is well documented, with ample evidence of sexual relations, from rapes to what appears to be relatively symbiotic romantic partnerships between white slave masters and black women in the antebellum South, a lesser-known aspect is the abuse endured by black male slaves at the hands of elite white women, that is, the planter class women. Yes, that too occurred. The planter class white women refers to a specific group of women who belong to the elite plantation-owning class in the American South of the United States during the antebellum era. These women were associated with the wealthy plantation owners, predominantly focused on cultivating cash crops such as cotton, tobacco, and rice, and relied heavily on slave labor. These wealthy plantation owners were referred to as the planter class, while their wives, who held privileged positions within the social hierarchy of the time, were the planter class white women.
Slack,
However,
yeah.
using an intersectional
You know, I was unfamiliar with much of this. You know, now I knew that a lot of the slave masters' wives in history had relationships with many of the slaves that the master owned. I was unfamiliar and hadn't been told the story of this relationship being forced upon the slaves. And when I'm hearing this, I can't help but to think about the trials and tribulations that uh, came upon Yosef,
Right.
son of Yaakov, son of
Right.
Israel, and
Indeed.
what he faced with his master's wife advancing on him.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's a great point. And it's ironic because I jumped to today and how these a lot of these brothers, especially these men, I should say, these so-called black men,
Hmm.
they hold these white women as the standard of
Hmm.
beauty of what a woman they aspire to be with them, especially when you make any kind of leeway.
Hmm.
They go and set up, uh, basically put their what they've built right into their hand. Uh,
Hmm.
and set it up to where it goes back to that nation, that community, as opposed to keeping it in their own. And it's wild. It's really wild how that thinking is. And I wonder if things would be different if more people saw these videos like this, which is why we're sharing this particular video, and not only for that, but edification of the people overall. But with this, how would this affect your mental state if you understood that this is what was going on with our ancestors? And then it takes me back to I don't know if you saw that movie, Bandingo. What was the name of it?
I believe it was Mandingo. I think that
Okay,
was
yeah,
the name of it.
okay,
Yeah.
kind, yeah. Where she was forcing that the brother to deal with her, and ended up having his baby, and thinking that it was going to be her husband's baby. She was just playing a harlot. And
Hmm.
when her husband found out, he was furious, killed her, poisoned her to death, and wanted to sought to boil the brother when he was powerless to do anything.
Con,
She
you
said, if
know.
you don't deal with me, I'm going to scream.
Hmm. I'd never seen the movie. My mother told me about it though when I was younger.
Mm.
She told me about how he put, Mandingo, the slave master put Mandingo in the boiling pot, and killed him.
He tried to. I'm trying to remember the end of it. I saw it a few years ago. Uh, but yeah, we're going to have to check that one out because
Hmm.
that's one that doesn't. That's an older movie, but it's one that doesn't get a lot of attention. That because it's one because it's older, and two because that don't fit the narrative of today, where you as a man you forced to deal with this woman, and he didn't want to fool her, but
Right.
he didn't have a choice, So, but continuing here, it's interesting. So,
Hmm.
socio-historical analysis, this very video delves into the often overlooked history of the exploitation and mistreatment faced by black male slaves, exploring the factors that may have contributed to the incidence of sexual encounters between the planter-class white women and slave men, the power dynamics embedded in them, and their implications in terms of sexual consent. The segment further demonstrates how these upper-class white women who engaged in these relationships use sex as an instrument of power, simultaneously perpetuating both white supremacy and patriarchy during this dark era. Before we get right into this proper, kindly hit the like button in front of you, share to keep spreading these eye-opening contents, and subscribe. You just remember that all you have to do is sit back and relax while we unravel before your viewing today the uncommon story of the planter-class white women and the remarkable abuse black male slaves encountered at their hands. Now let us begin. Intersection of power and gender slavery was not only a system defined by racial subjugation, but also one that reinforced gender hierarchies. While the planter class white women in the antebellum South were bound by societal expectations of femininity, they still held significant power within the context of slavery. These women played active roles in maintaining and perpetuating the institution. The authority they wielded extended to the management and treatment of enslaved individuals, including black male slaves. White women had the power to issue commands, give instructions, and enforce discipline within their homes and on plantations. It is of great relevance to note that in the American South before the Civil War, white women couldn't vote. They couldn't hold office. When they married, their property technically belonged to their husbands. But there was one thing they could do, just as white men could. They could buy, sell, and own enslaved people. In the book, They Were Her Property, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South.
Wow, I never heard of that book. They Were Her Property.
Yeah, I'm not familiar either.
Yeah. Let me pause for just a moment. This is on the channel Black Journals, and they have 193,000 subscribers. Very interesting so far as we've delved into this. And man, this is deep though. This is deep. So continuing.
Authored by Stephanie Jones Rogers, the historian makes the case that white women were far from being passive bystanders in the business of slavery, as previous historians have argued. Rather, they were active participants, shoring up their own economic power through ownership of the enslaved. In the past, historians had often based their conclusions about white women's role in slavery on the writings of a small subset of white Southern women. But Jones Rogers, who happens to be an associate professor of history at the University of California, Berkeley, drew on a different source this time from interviews with formerly enslaved people conducted during the Great Depression as part of the Federal Writers Project, an arm of the Works Progress Administration. These interviews, Jones Rogers writes, show that white girls were trained in slave ownership, discipline, and mastery, sometimes from birth, even being given enslaved people as gifts when they were as young as 9 months old. White slaveholding parents trained their daughters on how to be slave owners. They give them lessons in slave discipline and slave management. Some even allow for their daughters to mete out physical punishments, Jones Rogers says. Slaveholding parents and slaveholding family members gave girls enslaved people as gifts, for Christmas sometimes, when they turned 16 or when they turned 21. There are even accounts of slaveholding parents and family members giving white female infants enslaved people as their own. There is one particular instance of a case in a court record where a woman talks about how her grandfather gave her an enslaved person as her own when she was merely 9 months old. And just how could a 9-month-old baby have known that she had a slave of her own if she wasn't told so? Apparently, she has been schooled on the ropes. She grew up knowing that some absolute authority over another has been bestowed on her, that she had some waiting property of her own in the form of a human being. Stated a poet and writer on his findings in the book, They Were Her Property, by Jones Rogers. Such children grow up not even recognizing black slaves as fellow human beings. These exact nurturings have majorly contributed, no doubt, to the creation of highly racist and supremacist personalities in societies at large. Some deeply faulty mental structure this is, which must be destructured. A mentality that must be visited and revisited to create a new mindset, the kind that would at the end of the day see and regard all as equal.
Kind. So, I mean, how much emphasis have been put into these points that he's making out here? Like, basically, you have to rebuild the structure of the people who were in charge, and it hadn't happened. You know, that has not happened, and that's why we see things play out the way they are to this day. These people haven't been retaught. I mean, true enough, there is a quote unquote a more human type of what's the word I'm looking for? Where a sentiment, basically, there's a more human sentiment that goes out where it's not
Compassion.
right, where you don't deal with people as they dealt back then, but they do the same thing with the animals now. You know, so it's wrong, or it's viewed as wrong, to deal harshly with animals. You know, you take a dog and you know, tie it to a tree, you know, the police will show up to your place.
Mm-hmm.
Where before you took a dog and tied it to a tree was another big deal. You know what I'm saying? You could, I think they, I don't know about here, but in where I'm from in Arkansas, they made it a law where you had to put a dog on a tether where it could move back and forth. You can't just have it stationary tied in one place. That was a law that was changed on the book. So that's more humane. I get it. That's a more humane way of keeping an animal, but that kind of goes to the mind state of the people and how they change. So is it really, is a dog still a dog? Yes, a dog is still a dog, but same way they deal with so-called black people. They see the black people as black people, like you're still a black person to them until you change the narrative of what a black person actually is, which I know in some of it has been amended, but not in all of these people, and not, you know what I'm saying, fully and completely as it needs to be. So you got anything on that?
Nah, I mean, you're spot on with it though, dead on. Uh, I'm reminded of a few years ago there was a brother that was arrested, and he got, and I'm trying to think how exactly it was, but there was mistreatment of a dog, and the person got a whole bunch of time versus the killing of a black person received less time.
Right. Exactly.
So these are battles that are still being fought, or injustices that are still being fought. It's I'm not upset for people wanting to be humane towards a dog, but where was that humanity towards my people? Where is that humanity towards my people?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's all about the culture, and the culture has gotten more humane, but the view of the people, when you look at a black person as less than you, then that has to change. You have to see a person as more than you or equal to you, I should say, at least. And until you get to that point, until you get the people to that particular point, you cannot have you're not going to have the utopian society that they claim to have, that they claim to want. It's not going to exist. So
Yeah, and adding on to that, people might say, well, Ken and I, why are you upset? Nobody at this moment is mistreating you. You appear to get along and be at peace with all people. I've faced injustices as well, and currently, I'm not being oppressed as much as other people, but there's still oppression, still people over me. But if you do it to one of my brothers, or one of my sisters, it's as if you have done it to me, the way I view it, man.
absolutely, yeah. Injustice for my people is injustice for me, because
Con.
I can't be at ease until I know my people are well taken care of.
Indeed,
Period. So
I can't be happy.
exactly.
I'd feel my happiness being misplaced when I see injustices of my people, man.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. All right, let's continue here.
Sexual exploitation. One of the most distressing aspects of the abuse endured by black male slaves at the hands of elite white women was sexual exploitation. Although the dominant narrative often portrays white women as passive or innocent, there were instances where they actively engaged in non-consensual sexual relationships and rape, exploiting their power and control over black male slaves. These actions perpetuated a cycle of sexual violence and degradation, further dehumanizing the already enslaved. Here's one example of such many cases found in the autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, where the author Harriet Jacobs, who being once a slave, talks about how planters' daughters would take advantage of male slaves. They know that the women slaves are subject to their father's authority in all things, and in some cases they exercise the same authority over the men slaves. I have myself seen the master of such a household whose head was bowed down in shame, for it was known in the neighborhood that his daughter had selected one of the meanest slaves on his plantation to be the father of his first grandchild. She did not make her advances to her equals, nor even to her father's more intelligent servants. She selected the most brutalized, over whom her authority could be exercised with less fear of exposure. The kind of relationship described here by the author is clearly of a sexually predatory behavior. and such an act, as Jacobs confirms, was not uncommon, nor can it be classified as consensual in any meaningful sense of the word. It, in fact, constitutes a form of sexual abuse, if not rape. We thus see that plantation mistresses and elite women, like their male counterparts, were able to sexually control and abuse their slaves. Another way in which the planter-class white women were able to exercise sexual control over slaves was by threatening to accuse them of rape or attempted rape if they did not agree to sex. In doing this, elite white women used one of the primary instruments of patriarchal repression, the idea that they were weak and in need of white male protection, and by extension, in need of control and domination by white men, to exercise racial control over black male slaves. Possible causes of sexual exploitation. Why these women chose to sexually abuse slaves probably varied by situation. Perhaps some of them were simply bored or sexually frustrated. But perhaps, at least on a subconscious level, sexually exploiting slaves was a means of compensating for their lack of power in other aspects of their lives. Planter-class women were considered the property of their husbands and lacked considerable sexual agency relative to men. It is possible the sexual exploitation of slaves by women who had little power in relation to white men was a source of enjoyment that created a feeling of power. This is not to excuse the actions of sexually abusive white women, nor is it to suggest that female sexual abuse of slave men would not have occurred had women enjoyed a higher status in society. However, just as slave-owning white women often took out their frustrations on slaves through excessive cruelty and violence, they probably also used sex as a means of domination and control in a society in which they were relatively powerless.
Right. Well, they're making these men give them pleasure, and they're doing it with an iron fist, and at the threat of this extermination of your people. I mean, you can see in the movies, and I hate to use a movie as a historical reference, but often they use historical references when they make those movies. But they would say things like, "I'll kill every slave here," and let's put that lightly. If you don't do this, if you don't follow my instruction, I will kill all of you. And I mean, what you gonna do if you don't want to live? I mean, you don't want to die. You want to live, so you're gonna kind of conform to the situation.
Indeed, and it's one thing, perhaps may or may not, that slave in particular may or may not have cared about his life anymore, but he's thinking about his children and his mother and his brother that are still slaves. You got to take that into consideration as well, and kind of forced to succumb to these unwanted advances.
Exactly. So, yeah, this is definitely deep. Let's continue here.
Their freedom and mobility was severely limited. For example, they were generally not allowed to travel without an older male chaperone. Spousal abuse was often considered a legitimate method for men to control their wives in the antebellum era. Indeed, in private, many plantation women were unhappy with their lack of freedom and the expectation that they remain dutiful, obedient, pleasant, and cheerful, while their husbands had affairs with or raped female slaves. Knowing that the mixed race slave children...
I hate that he would use the term "had affairs with." That's not. You can't have an affair with somebody who you allegedly own. That's like saying, right. I mean, that's not reasonable. That's unreasonable. So I hate to use that term there. Or even rapes. It was always rape. If anytime you had some kind of a relationship with somebody who is under you, and that's rape. Period.
Con, that's equivalent to a year ago. I want to say that one of these governors, I forget what state, or one of these politicians referred to, our people who were in captivity. We know that they were in slavery and called slaves, but it called them settlers rather than what their real purpose was for being brought over here. They were immigrants. It's with the verbiage that they were using, but no, that they were slaves. You brought them here in bondage.
Captives, exactly. That's what they should have been said. So.
Captives, indeed.
Continue here.
Children who surrounded them were their husband's offspring was both humiliating and heartbreaking. Historian Catherine Clinton, 1982, has this to say: If plantation mistresses could live above reproach, their husbands, fathers, sons, and brothers could boast of the superiority of their civilization. She further goes ahead and terms them prisoners in disguise. Southern women, who generally married at a younger age than those in the North, not infrequently at 15 or 16 years old, were often left abandoned on plantations while their husbands traveled for business, pleasure, or military duty. The life of a plantation mistress was often lonely and sad. Physical abuse. By 1830, slavery was primarily located in the South, where it existed in many different forms. African Americans were enslaved on small farms, large plantations, in cities and towns, inside homes, out in the fields, in the industry, and transportation. Though slavery had such a wide variety of faces, the underlying concepts were always the same. Slaves were considered property, and they were property because they were black. Their status as property was enforced by violence, actual or threatened. People, black and white, lived together within these parameters, and their lives together took many forms. Physical violence was not limited to white male slaveholders. White women, too, participated in acts of brutality against black male slaves. These acts ranged from whipping and beating to inflicting other forms of corporal punishment, leaving lasting physical and psychological scars. A good example of the bad, unspeakable lengths to which physical abuse could go on black male and female slaves is the infamous story of none other than Madame Marie Delphine Lalaurie. Madame Lalaurie thrashed her slaves, gouged their eyes out, punched holes in their heads, and left maggots to infest the openings. And if you think this is all some terrible lie or some hoax, then best brace yourself for what you are about to hear concerning this 18th century slave owner. The terrible evil meted out on her slaves. Here's a brief one on Marie Delphine Lalaurie. On April 10, 1834, at the mansion at 1140 Royal Street in the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana, a fire broke out. The neighbors rushed out to help, offering to pour water on the flames and help the family evacuate. However, when they arrived, they noticed something odd by 19th century Southern elite standards. The woman of the house was trying to save her jewels and furs without the aid of her slaves. Madame Lalaurie, the great mistress of the house, alone, a mansion without slaves seemed shocking. When asked where her servants were, she told everyone to mind their own business. Some said this was mysterious enough. Others said they heard faint moans and screams from the attic. Either way, a small brigade took it upon itself to bust into the house and find the woman's slaves. Yet when they opened the door to the attic, they stopped dead in their tracks, some vomiting from the stench. It was impossible to stand the demonic mind-to-stomach twisting grisly sight. It was all there, stark, all the madness that a devil could be, all the ugliness of things miserable that can only be imagined. What the interlopers had found was the torture chamber of Madame Marie Delphine Lalaurie, consistently ranked after this as one of the most infamous serial killers in the world, right up there with the blood-drinking, cannibalistic 16th century Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Neighbors had confirmed their suspicions of her. The reason for the disappearance of all Lalaurie's slaves was now bare for the world to see. It was savagery. Heaps of corpses, organs, and limbs, slaves pinned to tables or cramped in small cages, metal bars with spikes wrapped around the slaves' necks to prevent them from moving their heads, while others were placed in small cages, and their bones had been dismantled and reset to fit in. Crazy! Live bodies with their eyes gouged, fingernails torn out, ears hanging by shreds of skin, or their mouths filled with feces and sewn shut, many of them, people with flayed skins and festering wounds. Several accounts claim they found one woman whose skin had been peeled off in spirals to a caterpillar, another with her bones broken and reset so that she looked like a crab, and one more whose intestines had been torn out and knotted around the waist. Many of these victims, some had claimed, were up to 100 who were supposedly still alive, putrid and starving. No kind of physical abuse has gone to such lengths. Lalaurie became famous for the depraved brutalization of her slaves. Legend has it that a 70-year-old slave cook who had been chained to the stove in the kitchen by Lalaurie, yet was slowly starving to death also, started the fire. While interrogated, the woman had admitted that she started the fire in an attempt to kill herself, then faced Lalaurie's torture. Madame Lalaurie had threatened to take her to the top room. No one who went to the upper room ever returned, according to the cook. The lady had decided that it was better to die than suffer at the hands of Madame Lalaurie. Following this discovery, the top chamber was broken into in order to investigate the cook's assertions. And without a doubt, the top room was hell on earth for the slaves who ever ended up there. Born on the 19th day in the month of March, 1787, in the then Spanish-ruled New Orleans as Marie Delphine McCarty, most of LaLaurie's life passed without any real indication of cruelty or evil. Despite the rumors that slaves killed her parents, the mistress actually lived a fairly normal and privileged life. She was a major part of New Orleans high society, and beloved as a kind, gentle, and courteous figure. LaLaurie's father was Louis Barthélemy de McCarty, originally Chevalier de McCarthy, whose father Barthélemy D. McCarthy brought the family to New Orleans from Ireland around.
Yeah, I had to go throw up.
Yeah.
Was,
we hear stories of similar acts with the kidnapping of our people nowadays, and they say that they're harvesting our organs and trying to take the melanin or these organs that are pumped with the blood, melanated blood pumps through these organs. We hear about the perversion or perversiveness rather, and the wickedness of Hollywood, and we scratch our head and we're like, could it all be true? A lot of times we're hearing about it here. It's documented.
Right.
It's documented here.
Right. Just the complete disregard of humanity and some of these people in this historical account here. Torture chambers, and I just can't imagine. That's just unreal. But man, yeah, and that's here. That was and this time at that time here, but these things exist all over. There are stories of on the continent of one class of people brutalizing another class, castrating and pulling off of skin and just all manner of terrible things, just brutally, just brutalizing people. But the people who often brutalize are often the same people that we are, and that's everywhere. I've read an article. This was a while back in not Vietnam, but what is that?
Korea?
No, not Korea. It was I can't remember the name of it. Not Thailand. I can't remember. Philippines. That's it. The Philippines. Yes, where they were brutalizing so-called black people, and not Africans. It was the people of the diaspora. It was our people that was scattered over in that particular area, in that region. And our people have been, subject to a great deal of destruction. And it's not gone unnoticed or unnoted. So, understand that part of it. This is
indeed. We a lot of people, they hear the truth because what we've been given with these scriptures is a watered down version. But when you come into the truth, you're like, why? Why, Abba? Why is Mashiach's garments gonna look like they're drenched in blood? Like, why? But then we hear stories like this, and we become to understand why.
This is why. Payback. Recompense.
Recompense, indeed.
Righteous judgment. They, to do unto them what they did unto they. I believe that's in Ezra, second Ezra, or first Ezra, one of those two. But man, that was unreal. But
and it's written somewhere. I forget exactly where it's written, but it says that they were given rule over us, but they went too far. It's and these are not my words, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what it says, but it says because you had gone too far with the oppression of the people.
Right. Oh yeah, we read that. Actually, we read that in Ezekiel just I believe last week, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where they were where he talked about the judgment of Babylon. When we were reading, I'm trying to remember what chapter. I can't remember what chapter. I want to say it was last week we were reading that as we finished it last night. So let's continue here.
30, during the French colonial period. Her mother was Marie-Jeanne Larable, also known as the widow Lecomte, as her marriage to Louis B. McCarty was her second husband. Both of Delphine's parents were prominent in the town's European Creole community. Her uncle by marriage, Esteban Rodriguez Miro, was governor of the Spanish-American provinces of Louisiana and Florida during 1785 to 1791, and her cousin, Augustin de McCarty, was mayor of New Orleans from 1815 to 1820. LaLaurie married 3 times and had 5 children, whom she was said to attend to lovingly. Her first husband was a Spaniard named Don Ramon de Lopez y Angulo, a Caballero de la Royal de Carlos, a high-ranking Spanish officer. The pair had 1 child together, a daughter, before his untimely death in Havana, while en route to Madrid. 4 years after Don Ramon's death, Delphine remarried, this time to a Frenchman named Jean Blanc. Blanc was a banker, lawyer, and legislator, and was almost as affluent in the community as Delphine's family had been. Together, they had 4 children, 3 daughters, and a son. After the death of Jean Blanc, Delphine married her third and final husband, a much younger doctor named Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie. In 1831, Madame LaLaurie purchased a 3-story mansion at 1140 Royal Street in the French Quarter. And as many society women did at the time, Madame LaLaurie kept slaves. Accounts of Delphine LaLaurie's treatment of her slaves between 1831 and 1834 are mixed. Harriet Martineau, writing in 1838 and recounting tales told to her by New Orleans residents during her 1836 visit, claimed that slaves of LaLaurie were observed to be singularly haggard and wretched. However, in public appearances, LaLaurie was seen to be generally polite to black people and solicitous of the health of those enslaved. On 2 occasions, she has been known to emancipate 2 of her slaves, according to court records: Jean-Louis in 1819 and de Vance in 1832. Funeral registers between 1830 and 1834 document the deaths of 12 slaves at the Royal Street Mansion, although the causes of death were not mentioned. However, public rumors about LaLaurie's mistreatment of slaves on her property had become sufficiently widespread that a local lawyer was dispatched to Royal Street to remind LaLaurie of the laws for the upkeep of slaves.
So one thing I want to point out on his narration here, I don't like how he refers to the people. Uh, you know, he's referring to them as slaves, and that's not how they should be referred to. They should be referred to the people that were kept as slaves, as opposed to just calling them slaves as if that's all that they were. That these were people, and not
God,
just that's a bit harsh. I don't know. Hopefully he'll see this and kind of understand and make an adjustment. It may seem like a small thing, but when you refer to a people, that's like referring to a person as anything derogatory. That's that's a derogatory term. Slave is, and yeah, it's hurtful as well. So I'm already put off a bit because of this evil of this person. So, but
you
yeah,
know, I'm really glad you made that point. These are individuals who had lives before becoming captives,
right,
lives that are documented in the scripture.
right,
Um, Now, we know that these people were dehumanized,
mm-hmm.
and when you call someone slave, it makes it easy for you to be
Yeah,
okay with the dehumanization of them. So you're exactly right, Art.
mm-hmm.
These were captives.
Exactly. These were people who were relegated to slavery, and
Hmm.
that's the reality. But just to refer to them as slaves, to her slaves, and like that's abusive. I mean, that's derogatory and abusive. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's rather sickening. I wish he wouldn't do that, but you know, he probably doesn't have that knowledge, whatever the case. So he's probably just
I didn't think about it until you just said it.
yeah, right, yeah. Okay, well, let's continue here.
During this visit, the lawyer found no evidence of wrongdoing or mistreatment of slaves by LaLaurie. Although
Now, ironically, that's the common theme today. You know, they send somebody to come and see about a situation. Oh, there's no wrongdoing here, and then they'll find a different reason to punish them or to get rid of them. That especially happens with the police. Oh, you killed a so-called black man who was handcuffed with his hands behind his back, and now he's dead. Well, there's no wrongdoing there, but your paperwork was incorrect, so we're going to have to let you go for that. Like, what? So it was okay to kill the so-called black man, but his paperwork being incorrect, that's not something you can train him on. Instead, you got to let him go. Like, what kind of foolishness is this? This is all the, like, basically, I can't fire you for saying you did something bad to a so-called black person, but what I'm going to fire you for is your lack of administrative uh, prominence or whatever the case. Yeah.
We saw that here in the city or locally in Louisville with the murdering execution of the sister Breonna Taylor. You know, the officers were arrested, but none of them were arrested for the murder of Breonna Taylor. They were arrested they were fired due to recklessly shooting into the apartment. And it wasn't even the apartment where Breonna was living. It was another apartment. And you know, forgive me if I twisted that up, but I know for a fact that none of them were arrested or even fired for the shooting of Breonna Taylor. And then one of them was fired because of the improper warrant or the way that he went about getting the warrant to raid her home. You know, so what you just said is the truth. It's the truth.
All praises to the Father. Yeah, so I mean that's been since the old time, since this time here, and we can also read in the text that they will do evil to us and hold themselves not guilty. What verse is that? What
man, I use it a lot.
remember, I'm just evading me right now, but they hold themselves not guilty.
I'm gonna find it out. I'm gonna find it.
So we won't continue. We'll come back to it when you get it there.
Although subsequent to the lawyer's visit, one of LaLaurie's neighbors had seen a 12-year-old slave girl fall to her death from the roof of the Royal Street mansion while trying to avoid punishment from a whip-wielding LaLaurie. Two of such reports are on record as being true. One, that a man was so scared of punishment that he threw himself out of a third-story window, choosing to die rather than be subjected to Madame LaLaurie's torture. The other report, however, concerned the 12-year-old slave girl named Leah in the year 1833. Leah, it was said, was brushing Madame LaLaurie's hair and had unintentionally pulled a little too hard, causing LaLaurie to fly into a rage. The mistress had chased the little slave girl with a whip until the girl fell off the roof of the house and died. The incident had led to an investigation of the LaLauries, in which they were found guilty of illegal cruelty, as Leah's body was discovered hidden in a well through the aid of some witnesses who had seen LaLaurie bury the girl's corpse. She was fined $300 by the authorities and forced to forfeit 9 slaves of her household. These 9 enslaved people were bought back by the LaLauries through an intermediary relative.
Good grief.
You know, that might as well not even held her guilty. You know, what did you do? But you know, that script is coming from Zechariah chapter 11 verse 5, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty, and they that sell them say, blessed be Yahweh, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not.
Pity them not. Right, God. Yeah, whose possessors, that's the word I was looking for, the possessors, slay them and hold themselves not guilty. Like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. Oh, yeah, he was good. That's okay. It's okay to do that. And, you know, and I wonder about this man, you know, I wonder why he didn't throw her out the window instead of himself. You know, like if I gotta go let me take you with me.
Mhm.
Let me take you. I at least grab her and jump out the window if you're gonna do it that way. But take her with you. Don't leave and leave. I really hate that. I really hate that. And I don't know. Maybe we just a different breed now. But if a woman was being that oppressive that I'm trying to flee from her, rather than me killing myself, I think it'd behoove me to grab her by the throat and throw her out the window myself. I don't know if I can
Mhm.
say that on YouTube, but I said it. So throw her out the window, and if it works, if I'm gonna jump out the window, I'm gonna be holding her while I jump, and we'll both fall to our, if that be the case. But
And I believe that that's the sentiment, or was the sentiment, and is the sentiment of a lot of our brothers. You hear about the failed rebellions
mm-hmm.
that our ancestors who were captives held, and how they were unsuccessful oftentimes, only because they were betrayed by other captives.
Exactly.
But you know yeah, I believe they held the same sentiment. Where our lives are already gone, so let's take as many as we can with them. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Even if it's just a couple, two or three. I mean,
Hmm.
if I'm done, I no sense and no sense in not trying to take down my enemy. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. But let's continue. Whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty, and say that they blessed of the Most High, of the power of our people, and their wrongdoing to us. I mean, what
Hmm.
kind of foolishness is that? Continuing here.
And returned to the Royal Street mansion, where she continued to torture them until the night of the fire outbreak in the year 1834, 10th day of the month of April. Marie Delphine Lalaurie and her husband had fled by a boat, leaving the butler, who had also participated in the torture, to face the wrath of the crowd who had stormed into her mansion, charged by the insanity of her evil. Some historians have been compelled to think that perhaps the death of her family at the hands of slaves during the Haitian Rebellion had erupted the volcanic darkness within the woman somehow, which had taken hold of her personality. But that is no excuse for such outrageous evil. And although charges were never filed against Lalaurie, her reputation in the upper class society was destroyed. It is believed that she died in Paris in December 1842. Exploring the abuse of black male slaves by white women reveals an unsettling dimension of history that has often been overlooked or deliberately silenced. By confronting this painful reality, we challenge the conventional narratives surrounding slavery and deepen our understanding of the complex power dynamics at play. Acknowledging these historical injustices is an important step towards building a more inclusive and equitable future. So, what do you think generally about this? Kindly
Yeah. So, uh, man, that is that was a deep, very deep, and hurtful. Not only deep but also hurtful situation to read some of these. And wow, wow. So anyway, I don't know. I'm my stomach's still upset. Uh,
Yeah, and understandably why. You
yeah.
know, perhaps if there was some sort of atonement, some sort of admittance to the wrong and trying to rectify the wrong,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps we wouldn't feel as ill as and upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but there hasn't been, and in fact, it continues even to this day. And you have people that will argue and want to have this history whited out, where nobody mentions it. You talk about bringing critical race theory into the schools, and these people have a fit because they don't want this to be told, but this is in fact what happened and what continues to happen in many forms. Huh?
Right.
so
Absolutely.
so no, we're not okay with this. Like, we will remember this.
Right. Right. Kind. Man. Yeah. That's that torture of those people, those human beings, my people, our
Mm-hmm.
people, and uh, you know, sound like she had torturous means just set up for the purpose of trying to inflict harm as great as much as possible on these people. Uh, that's exactly what we were seeing here, and
Mm-hmm.
it was it's hard. It's hard to hear. It's hard to think about, and it's hard to imagine that this is what our people had to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even harder when the brother or the man who's reading it is talking about is calling the people, like referring to them in a derogatory manner. And no shade against the brother. I know he probably does not. He probably just reading the book or reading the script or whatever it is, and it could have been a AI or something that came up with it or whatever the case. Because it has some pretty. Uh, I can tell he wasn't just coming off the top of his head with it because it has some adjectives that were. It was very descriptive. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if you could talk that descriptively about something unless you had some pretty firsthand account for it. But you know, wow. But anyway, that's pretty much all I got on that. Uh, be mindful of these things. That when it comes to these relationships, who you choose to be in a relationship with, uh, first of all, you got to understand. I mean, the video we went over last week was a great implication of where our people were and what society really tries to make, um, how they try to suppress the beauty of our people, of our women and our men, because it's thought of that we or were and are today currently even less than, and it's trying to be thought of that somehow we're being uh, accepted. But even with our men, they want our men as weak as possible uh, in dresses and you know hair with perms, as feminized as effeminate as possible. So I mean, still that's still the destruction of our people, because we know that we can't, by Torah, by instruction of the Most High, we can't do these things. These things are unlawful, and you shouldn't even want to do anything of that nature, because that's not helpful to your people. How are you helping your people? By effeminizing yourself. You're supposed to be a man protecting your people, protecting your family, protecting your children, your wife, even your mother and your brothers. How can a man depend on you to watch his back when you thinking you're a woman? That's not conducive to our people, and which is why the Most High is not with that. Which is why I'm certainly not with that, and would not stand with such behavior. Uh, period. So uh, that's all I got on final thoughts. You got anything else you want to put in, Aki? Did I lose you? I may have lost Aki and Naya. You may have lost us.
Salakia, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Okay, Salakia, I was looking at the law tour.
Okay.
So, you know, there are some that might ask the question, well, how do you brothers feel about, the black on black violence that's going on and that's rampant? And see, we have laws that govern all that, coming from the book of Shemot. It says that he who smiteth, causing another one to die, he shall be put to death,
Mm-hmm.
so that you will keep the sin from the congregation.
Right.
Likewise, there's a unfortunately there's a brother running around the South End right now, preying upon women,
Mm,
robbing them, trying to do sexual things to them.
mm,
So Ken and I, how do you feel about that? He would be, if we were in rulership and if we were running things in righteousness, he
mm.
would be dealt with, so
Right.
that you wouldn't, so no stranger would be able to cry out to the Most High and say that they're being mistreated.
Exactly.
So, you know, when we begin to rule again, we will rule in righteousness,
Right.
considering the Torah, considering what has been taught to us before, not wanting to the Most High to be displeased with us, because when He's displeased with us, we find ourselves in captivity,
Hmm.
under the rule of wicked people.
Hmm.
So it behooves us to remember the law.
Absolutely. Unequivocal. No doubt. Unequivocal. And man, yeah. Yeah, this one was we're gonna have to, probably have to find something good to go into.
Uplifting,
Man, because this was
indeed.
heavy. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was gonna be that bad, but I knew it was gonna be, some.
There's a part two to this as well.
Yeah, yeah. We may hit that part two, matter of fact. Yeah, we may hit that one and just get it all out the way, because I don't want to come back in 2 weeks and try to hit that and destroy my mood even worse. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So with that, we'll conclude this one here. This went almost an hour, which is longer than what I anticipated, but it had to be done because, man, we need to know, we need to understand these things, and where some of these things come from. And I pray that brothers of my people, men of my people, would consider these things and understand, if you work and you built anything in this society, as far as a home, uh, any kind of income or wealth, any business, any kind of accolade, anything that you built, when you go to another nation and to make her your wife, in this society, what you have, what you leave, is going to go to her. So economically, it does not make sense. Not even for the sense. Now, for you people or for our people who will deal with the matters of the heart and all this other stuff, okay, that's why I wasn't good. But I'm speaking from an economical standpoint. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
even talking about how you feel about a person. Economically, you're giving everything that you built back to the society that that when you were brought here for oppression. So you're giving it right back to that society. So think about those things. Think about what we saw in this video, and how things were relegated to your people who were made to be slaves in
Mm-hmm.
this country. So with that,
Land backing real quick.
yeah,
You know, I know some interracial couples. And the way I look at it, brothers that do that, are you are you no longer coming to the cookout that your people are having and going to their cookout? That's really how I judge that situation.
mm,
You know, uh, some of these Gentile women have circumcised their hearts to where they can come to the cookout. They feel comfortable coming to our cookout. Uh, Now, there's the other side of it where what you just mentioned,
mm,
where these brothers are no longer coming to the cookout anymore. They're going to their cookout. And what you just said was very true. Economically, those resources are gone from the community. When you were supposed to be bringing back and uplifting your people, that no
mm,
longer happens when you stop coming to the cookout.
mm,
And the cookout is just an analogy of congregating and being around your people. you
mm,
know
building and sharing one with another. And
hmm
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So with that being said, we're going to close out, of course, with the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep His commandments. Why? Because this is the entire duty of man. It is imperative that we understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep His commandments. Why? Because this is the reason that we were made. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, when all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, the judgment will be that you fear the Most High and keep His commandment. Why? Because this is the entire reason that we were made. I am your Akazaki Yahu, joined by my most esteemed Ak Akinanaya. Give all praise, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashim, Yahushua Hamashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom Wabarukim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant. Until that day, Shabbat Shalom, family.
Shabbat shalom, Mishpachah.
Praise to the Father.